Ladies and gentlemen, we got a problem that is plaguing Valorant from Iron all the way to Immortal and beyond. And this might be a problem that you're dealing with, or you're the problem. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the Wkey problem. But before we get started, smash that sub button. Come on now. Anyways, without further ado, let's just jump right into it, shall we? So here's a problem that has almost never come up in other games, but players are seemingly afraid to push W, to push in aggressively. The thing that you and your teammates need to be doing every single time is trying to push in and swing together. If an enemy's in a corner, there's no reason to take 1v1s over and over again. This is the problem. Oftentimes, especially if you have huge numbers advantage, let's say you're like 4v1, that person only manages to clutch up and kill every single one of you most of the time because you take individual fights with them again and again. You don't peek him from multiple angles or swing peek him at the same time. You're essentially taking effectively 1v1 matchups every single time. And that's a problem because you do not have to take the 50-50. You do not have to outskill him to win when you have a numbers advantage. This is the Wkey problem, but it doesn't just start there. The biggest problem that is happening is players baiting each other. Information Andy is what it's been called, and that's where you just send in one of your friends or one of your teammates, and they go in and they die, and you use that information to maybe get a kill or maybe make a play. Here's the problem. Baiting your teammates can potentially get you no value and might just end up in them dying. If you swing through and push onto point together, you're able to cover way more ground and actually trade out kills even if someone dies, versus just waiting for your teammates to go in and they get shot from an angle. You peek that angle and that person's already gone. Now, while we've identified the problem, let's tell you some things that you can do to actually get more impact instantly and start actually winning a lot of fights that you should be in the first place through tactics and not just taking 50-50s. So the first thing is, if you have utility, use it and follow through, and the rest of your team should follow through with you. Let me give you this example. If you're someone like a Phoenix or a Breach, you should be using your utility to peek corners and peek around angles. It makes no sense for you to essentially be waiting in the back line and waiting for your allies to actually go peek an angle when you have utility to force it through. That is the first thing that you can do. The second thing is, when your teammates are engaging or your initiator engages with his flash peek, swing through with him. If you swing through the corner, you see an enemy, you just hold shift and you fire at them. Pretty easy stuff. Then you can at the very least trade kills, but more often than not, the enemy is going to be overwhelmed and he's going to take two forms of fire, so they'll just die. It's not possible for them to win that matchup very easily. Don't just let an enemy sit in a corner and one person peeks him and he kills him. One person peeks him and he kills him. One person peeks him and he kills him. That is exactly what you don't want to do. You have the utility first, the follow through, and then the team swing through, which should all happen one after the other or almost at the exact same time. Now, the next problem with Wkeying in general is that people aren't calling things by name, and it's making it pretty difficult to actually follow through with your team or Wkey. When you push onto a point, knowing where enemies are peeking and coming from can be really effective at actually shutting people down and trading out kills altogether. So when you're getting instantly fired from a direction, or if someone's in a certain location, you can instantly call it. And you can also call exactly where you died from if you died as well. You could say, hey, there's a Ray Showers. That will give your team effective information to where when they push onto point, someone can use utility to block it off. Someone could potentially make a play on it, like peek it or potentially hold that angle. Or last but certainly not least, they could just play out of its LOS, so they're not playing directly into the rays that's holding showers. Giving your teammates information and pushing in with your team is something that, for some reason, in particular with Valorant, players are doing far less. While in many games, it's the opposite problem, where players are just Wkeying non-stop. Another reason that it's so important to push onto point, swing out kills, and get an advantage is because, especially when you're on attack, right? Most of the time, there will not be their whole team on one site, right? Usually there will be like two people on one site, two people on another site, and then one person kind of in the middle or lurking. If you force trades to happen on one site and the enemy doesn't actively back off or use their utility to zone you away, you force trades. Sure, you might have traded one for one, but you followed it all up because you traded through, you swung through, you never let the enemy team get more than one kill per swing because you did all the swing stuff that we talked about earlier. Then, yes, it might be down to a 3v3, but you have bomb planted on site, which puts the ball in the enemy's court and gives you a strategic advantage because they are on a time crunch and they have to actually defuse. This is why trading aggressively is important and making sure to not just wait forever. A lot of times teams will just wait there. None of them want to peek aggressively. None of them want to peek first. So they're just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. And then they're going to get flanked. And then they're going to get everyone to rotate to that point. And it just ends really poorly for you when you instead can swing through, take these aggressive duels, trade out, and then you can secure the point and put the ball in the enemy's court, give yourself a tactical advantage. Now, last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about Wkeying on defense, which is something that I'm sure that a lot of people might be doing in your games, where they just Wkey on defense and then die. Now, there's a time and a place for Wkeying on defense, but the problem is you need to keep some things in mind. First off, if you Wkey too soon, you could potentially give up your tactical advantage with holding a site. Defenders would have an overwhelming advantage if there was only one possible site to plant. Imagine if there was only a plant site and the enemy could hold 5 people to your 5 attackers. The enemies would have an incredible advantage. The only advantage that you have as attackers is the fact that you do not necessarily have to go one place or the other, so the enemy have to adequately hold multiple sites, because once you actually place the spike down, the advantage switches from defender's side advantage to attacker side advantage, depending on if you have the bomb planted or not. When you're on defense in particular and you want to push aggressively, think about a couple of things. First off, realize that if the enemy is not actively pushing onto another side or another site, you could easily get punished for this. Enemies can set up flanks for you, enemies can wait for you, potentially the whole enemy team could rotate and you could just die out of nowhere. On top of that, you give up your defensive positioning onto a site in the first place. Now, I'm not saying flanking is terrible or flanking is bad, but you have to think about what you're giving up and what the potential outplays the enemies can do. They could do things like go through a teleporter, or they could do things like route around or re-peek you. There's so much things that could happen. And if you're pushing behind them trying to make this extremely god play but end up dying, now not only did you die to the enemy, but now they get to take the site for free that you were supposed to be defending. More often than not, as a defender, the far safer play, especially if you're playing a character that doesn't have utility or some aggressive base kit, you're not playing a Phoenix or a Breach or anything like that, the far safer play is, instead of rotating around and trying to flank the enemy, you rotate back to your team from the backside through spawn. That is far safer. Now, if you're a character like an Omen or a Raze or potentially a Phoenix like we talked about, and you have an aggressive base kit that can be used to make these plays, and you can evaluate the risk versus reward, and it could be worth it to turn a team fight, then sure, go for it. But don't make it your de facto playstyle. Don't flank every single time on defense. Don't give up your inherent defensive advantage, especially if the team re-rotates. So I hope that this has given you some things to think about, and I hope that this video has at the very least helped you understand why you need to be Wkeying with your teammates. Wkey, come on, everyone wants to press it. Just push that Wkey. You know what else you should push though? That subscribe button. And if you like this video and want to see more, let me know exactly what kind of video you want to see down below, and I'll be sure to be right on it. Anyways, that's all we got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time.